Joe and I want to offer the thoughts and prayers from the people of New Hampshire to the victims in Aurora, Colorado.
I would also like to offer my thoughts and prayers to the families and victims of the Orlando terrorist attack.
Mr. Speaker, our thoughts and prayers are with the families impacted by the massacre in Las Vegas.
Mr. Speaker, the American people are tired of being outraged, of sending thoughts and prayers.
The call for thoughts and prayers has become a familiar response to mass shootings in America. But many Democrats say thoughts and prayers are not a sufficient response after the massacre in Las Vegas this fall. Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy tweeted, "To my colleagues, your cowardice to act cannot be whitewashed by thoughts and prayers. None of this ends unless we do something to stop it." In 2012, Murphy represented Newtown in the House of Representatives. He spoke this week with my colleague, Elaine Quijano.
You once said the gun violence movement was asleep from 1994 to 2012. What has the movement accomplished in the past 5 years?
Well, the movement's getting stronger every single day. We've had 5 state referendums to tighten gun laws. 4 of them have passed. Many states like Connecticut have tightened our laws. It's resulted in a 40% reduction in gun crimes in our state. And voters are starting to come to the polls caring about gun violence in a new way. The Virginia special election exit polls showed that guns was the #2 issue, right behind health care. That would never have happened 5 years ago. This is a social movement. It's going to take a long time before we change all of the laws we need to in Congress, but we're getting stronger. We're catching up to the gun lobby every single day.
As you well know, in Washington, there's been little legislative progress on bump stocks, little on background checks, little on banning assault weapons. Is it time for gun control advocates in Congress to pursue different tactics?
I think we need to look at this as a real long-term endeavor. Remember, it took 10 years from the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan to the passage of the Brady handgun bill. It took decades for other social causes to achieve consensus in this country. So we will get there eventually. And the fact that we now have on the floor of the Senate the first bipartisan background checks bill since Sandy Hook tells you that Republicans are beginning to realize that if they continue to stand in the way of any kind of change, there will be a real electoral price for them to pay. That's a new phenomenon.
Well, you've talked about the power of the NRA. Why do you think there's not a single organization with that level of reach and influence on your side of the debate?
Well, the NRA has been growing their political power for decades. The organizations on our side, like Gabby Gifford's organization or Moms Demand Action, are only 4 years old. You simply can't expect our side of this political fight to get as strong as a group that's been organizing for decades. But we're getting stronger every single day. We're winning more referendums than we're losing. We're beating pro-NRA senators in the states that we target. So give us some time because 95% of the American public are on our side on the issue of background checks, and I just don't think that in the long term we can lose this fight.
Well, a number of organizations have formed since the Sandy Hook massacre that are aimed at pursuing changes at the state level. Is the future of gun control at the state level or the national level?
I don't think you can make a choice. State changes really do make a difference, and those referendums that we've passed have made a difference. Again, Connecticut, we've seen a dramatic reduction in gun crimes because of our laws. But in Chicago and New York, all of the guns that are being used for crimes in those states are coming from out of state, from jurisdictions with loose gun laws. So until you have a national background check requirement, no city is going to be able to stop the flow of illegal guns. So you need to do both. State laws make a difference. They do, and they're passing more frequently now than ever. But national change is the real panacea to what is at the heart of this epidemic.
President Obama said this after a 2015 mass shooting in Oregon, quote, "This is something we should politicize. It is relevant to our common life together, to the body politic." Was that helpful to the gun debate?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a gun lobby invention, this idea that you can't talk about policy change in the 24, 48 hours after a mass shooting. That doesn't occur after a terrorist attack. The President of the United States is tweeting about policy change within a few hours, and every single day in this country there's a mass shooting. It's just that only the truly epidemic ones are the ones that reach national news media. So we have to be talking about policy change every single day in this country, or we'll never end up doing anything about the 90 people a day who die.
But to frame it as a political issue, does that not send people automatically to their corners?
No, it is a political issue because the only way that this changes is by the laws of the country changing, and that is a political question, whether we have enough support here to change the background checks laws to reflect the will of 95% of the American public. Listen, I know for some people politics is a dirty word, but it's how things change in this country for the better by exerting political power to try to make our country better and safer.
All right, Senator Chris Murphy, thanks very much, Senator, for your time.
Thank you.
Politicians in this country show little hope of finding middle ground when it comes to gun policy. We found some Americans that have. Our final conversation tonight is between Kathy and Alicia. Kathy's a libertarian who doesn't believe gun control is effective. Alicia is a conservative who supports more regulation. Both women say that their views about gun ownership have evolved over time.
Kathy, what's your opinion of gun control, if we're calling it that?
I don't actually believe gun control is effective for a lot of reasons. I can definitely appreciate the desire to want to fix things, but I don't think that gun control in its overarching sense is effective at all.
So do you believe in any regulation on guns? Some regulation, a little bit of regulation?
I would say a little regulation. I would support the ability for authorities to take the guns out of hands of people who are a threat to themselves or others.
I have to agree with you that I don't think that gun control is effective at this point, but that there needs to be more put in place to be able to get a gun, because there's just not enough into place, and it is way too easy to get one. More regulations, that's the word I was looking for, to be able to have a gun.
So what gun regulations are in place now that you would like to see go away?
I think that the regulations that are in place right now don't necessarily need to go away. I don't necessarily think that they're very effective, but trying to repeal them really only creates more of a political chasm between the people that believe in the Second Amendment and those who don't. The things that are here currently haven't stopped mass shootings from happening. So why adding more regulation makes sense to anyone doesn't really compute with me.
What's your take on that?
I can understand. I see it as that the regulations that we have now are not effective right now, but I think that there still needs to be stricter regulations to be put in place, because at this point, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment as well, but that's very open to interpretation.
Absolutely.
I went in with my husband last year, and all they did, know nothing about him, nothing about his mental state. Big part of things that I think would be helpful if there was some sort of regulation that had to do with mental ability. And we went in, he had a 5-minute background check, and we walked out with a gun, and that was it.
And I agree in theory where it would be great if there were some kind of way to regulate and know how a person's mental health, their mental health history before they can buy a gun. But at what point does that cross a boundary of HIPAA regulations? I just don't think that the regulations that we could put in place could really stop someone, especially if they haven't been to a mental health professional or a doctor, or necessarily displayed. A lot of the shooters that we've had in the past have never had that kind of history, so a regulation like that being put into place wouldn't have prevented any of those previous shootings.
That's just a step. I think would be a step in the right direction. And then you do have to work around everything. Is it really their right to know your health and your mental health?
Right.
But that might be part of, hey, if you want to be a gun owner, this is what has to take place. But I see I'm very in the middle with everything.
It's a tough balance for sure.
Have there been things in your life that have changed the way you look at guns and gun control?
Becoming a parent definitely affects every aspect of my life and my beliefs. I mean, of course, you have your ideals, and then as a parent, sometimes you just don't have the privilege of principles necessarily. You see things happening, and all you want to do above anything else is protect your kids. So that definitely affects the way I see guns and the way I look at the entire world.
I'm just curious how it changed your opinion on gun control.
Well, it definitely made the entire mass shooting issue more real. When it's just you that you're concerned about, you don't worry so much about not being able to protect another human being, but and ideals. Well, it's more an abstract than a reality. So, you know, I probably was a little more militant, a little less restrictive about people's right. I think that it just puts a more of a real world perspective into things.
Have your views evolved over time?
Yes, they most certainly have. I was going to school in Tucson, Arizona, and I was actually, one night I was out with friends. I was in a bad part of town. I didn't know it. I was actually in a drive-by shooting, a gang-related drive-by shooting, and I was shot through the liver with an AK-47. Wow. And so that's why that gun, when I hear that, that goes off, and it makes me think of something completely different from when I was growing up.
Yes.
And
do you feel something when you hear it? Like, is there a visceral reaction when you hear the name of that gun?
I can't
yes,
imagine.
absolutely. Yes, it does. You know, I spent months in the hospital, months and months. You know, I had 15 surgeries. Wow. And this was all a young kid who was 17 who shouldn't have had a gun to begin with.
Of course.
And I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. And of course, that completely changed my life and changed how I see that part of gun control. Even though I was in a drive-by shooting, I can still sit here today and say that I agree that we have the right to keep and bear arms even after all of that, happened. But I do think stronger regulations putting in place can make a difference. And any bit of difference, just for an example, like what happened to me, any bit of difference can save a life.
On the flip side, if someone is able to carry a gun and prevent a violent act from happening against them, and an additional regulation being in place perhaps stops them from ever getting a gun because they just decided it's too much work, it's too hard, or they don't want the government having their mental health information. And as much as having children makes me want to protect them outside, that when they're away from me, having kids has made my desire to be a responsible gun owner that much stronger.
Yes.
So that in my home and in my life, I can protect myself and my loved ones with a weapon if need be.
Yes.
It's just a very difficult balance, and I can imagine you probably understand that more than anyone.
And I think you bring up a really good point, just being a responsible gun owner. That's the key there.
And
I think that's really it.